It really is this thing. We are all capable of so much more than we realize, and we don't know how much we are standing in our own way.
If you are interested in making a sustainable living, you're going to love my guest today, especially if you are a musician. And if you're listening to this, you're probably a musician. Angela Beeching, author of Beyond Talent, has helped countless musicians get past the overwhelm and frustration of working in the music industry by helping people find jobs that they're great at, that people need, there's a market for it, and that they actually might love doing. Stay tuned because we're going to dive into all of that with Angela on the Honesty Pill podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Honesty Pill podcast, where we are all about helping musicians create successful, sustainable careers without the overwhelm and maybe with just a little bit less stress. We dive into audition strategy, performance hacks, and even creating your own business because you'd be surprised, so much of makes a sustainable career comes down to mastering your preparation mindset. So I guess this is season 4. I kind of took a break for the summer because it was 1,000 degrees at the Hollywood Bowl where I was working, and I just didn't feel like sitting in my office in front of studio lights. So I am super excited to share this episode with you and be back. First, some quick housekeeping. A quick shout out to the sponsor of the Honesty Pill podcast, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Yamaha has been a huge supporter of my professional career, and they've also been a huge supporter of this podcast since day one. Their dedication to innovation and excellence is actually pretty astounding. But what really stands out to me is how Yamaha brings the same passion and support not only to marquee artists that you might recognize, but also to beginners just starting out on their own musical journeys with a real commitment to music education all across the country. Want to know more? Head over to Yamaha at usa.yamaha.com, and thank you to the Yamaha Corporation again for making this podcast possible. And before I forget, please subscribe to this channel on YouTube and hit that little notification bell so you don't miss anything happening over here at Honesty Pill Mission Control. All right. I'm thrilled to have Angela Beeching on the show. Angela is a career coach consultant, the author of Beyond Talent, this book. I got my copy right here. And also has become, the book is the go-to for musicians looking to take control of their professional lives. Among other things, Angela is the former director of the Career Services Center at the New England Conservatory, where I went to school. More later on that. And she's been helping musicians set goals, manage their time, and break through the frustration that so many of us face. And Angela, to be honest, I've known you since, I think, 1993-ish. And it's crazy that this is the first time we're sitting down to do an actual podcast. So welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to reconnect, Chris. Thank you so much.
One of the best things about social media, and there are many upsides and downsides, obviously, is that you and I, like so many other people, reconnected recently after 30 years since we connected back at NEC. So it's I think there's some wins there.
For sure.
I think I'm going to end up approaching this whole interview backwards because I think the whole conversation we're going to have today can be broken down into, I want to be happy, I want to have a job that pays the bills, and I want to be happy doing the job that pays the bills. Is that kind of like, do you think you could put that in the bucket of Beyond Talent and what we're going to talk about?
Yeah. It's a weird thing. Just what does it take for people to be happy? What is that weird mix? What's the alchemy that gets it just right for people? And that's one thing I've been fascinated from the very beginning with this work, because what we might think of as success in terms of our career is just one component of this. And that whole thing about not being so obsessed with the outcome that you can't enjoy the journey, that is like the Zen question for all of us.
God, it's such a hard pill to swallow, though, if you're a student. Like, don't worry about the outcome. It's all about the journey. I think the perspective is not there when you're a student. Let me start with a very basic question. In your experience, does it seem like most musicians actually have a plan? And what I mean by that is, when I started out at NEC, I had no GPS coordinates for my future. I was just so happy to be there that somebody validated me by saying, yes, you can come to our school. It never crossed my mind to actually think ahead. What do you think? Was I the only one that had no clue?
No, this whole thing about what people start out with is a dream. Sometimes it's a wild fantasy. Sometimes and there's this big blank space between where they are now and where they want to be. So that's one of the exercises that I often give to students, to think about one of those in between places, like a year out of graduation or a year beyond now, wherever you are. What would get you in the direction of your dream? And those practical action steps, that's exactly where people fall down on the job because they can't picture the how long it might take, which might be too discouraging to imagine. But that thing about what's my commitment? What's my motivation? What do I really want? Those are the key questions that help people find the path that works.
You actually mentioned some practical tools in actually getting things done. Time blocking, backwards planning, tools to manage imposter syndrome, fear. What are some of your favorite tools that we can talk about in a nuts and bolts sort of way for if you're in school? Let's talk to students right now. If you're in school and everything's sort of swirling around, and you're kind of getting your bearings and figuring out what your musical identity is, what are some things that can get your feet planted on the ground today that might help you for that long-term after graduate school revelation?
Yeah. So this goes back to that index card exercise that I usually give people at the beginning, during orientation. So on one side of the index card, I call it the magic index card, to write down what it is you'd like to be doing after you graduate, and not just the job. Can you say, is there a city you'd like to be living in? What are the other things going on in your life that would make this fulfilling in some way? Because I want people to taste it, like to really have a sense of that. And then I ask them to flip to the other side of the card and to write down 3 things that they could do this week. This is the scary thing, this actual week that would help move them forward. And I tell them, this isn't about practicing really hard because we know you're going to do that. It isn't about, going to all your classes because you're going to do that. But these kind of extracurricular things that would get you asking questions of the people that could, start a conversation with you to realize, oh, you have agency here. And this is beyond what your teacher might see for you or the path that you've got. So often you talk to a young musician and yeah, they're in a program for X or Y, but they're also really interested in film scoring or some other area. And that thing, that dream that they've got, my heart goes out to people because when you talk to people who are much further out in their careers, what they inevitably complain about is that they didn't follow through on these dreams. That when people, are really regretting, that's the thing. Did I dare to do that? And when I do this exercise with students, often what they're writing down is in terms of 3 action steps it's way too global. I'm going to find out about grant money, or I'm going to, do this or that. The other thing I said, no, we got to get way more granular. What's the specific step? It's often an email that they're afraid to send. Same thing with me. Say, like the death cookie for the week. Like, what is the thing you've been avoiding,
Did
right?
you say did you
So
say death cookie? I love it.
yeah, yeah. So it's a scary email, a scary phone call. What is it going to take for this ball to get rolling, towards the future that you want to create? Because I think that is the worst thing. Not that I'm going to say anything bad about marvelous music schools. We've all been through them. We've all benefited from them, but there can easily be a sense of overwhelm and feeling all I can do is what I'm being asked to do. And we lose this sense that we are, at the end, we are in charge of this whole thing. And it's your life. We want you to feel that you are in the driver's seat.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, you just gave me so many questions. So first of all, let's talk about you being in charge as a student. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guide students into, I don't want to say questioning authority, because you're there to study with a mentor, with a teacher, with a coach, with a somebody who hopefully knows more about what's going on in your field than you do. That's why they're teaching at a college. However, the fit between a particular style or learning style or even the information may not always be a perfect lock between mentor, student, teacher, student. So I think, along with what you just said about you are in charge, is how do you develop advocacy for your own self while you're also in a position of tell me what to do. This is why I'm here. Like, it's like a really weird balance point, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I just want to say, part of me wants to say it's a developmental process. And at some point, the light bulb goes on above your head and you realize, whoa, this really is up to me. I'll just say, when I was in grad school, I was studying with Timothy Eddy, and he left the conservatory and he was going to these other, teaching at these other institutions. He wasn't yet at Juilliard, and I wanted to follow him. So this was this question, what is it going to take, and where am I going to end up next? And then the other time that this happened was after grad school, or no, before I entered grad school. The teacher I was studying with died. This was Madeline Foley many years ago, and I was on my own to prepare for grad school. And this was, the first time it really dawned on me that it isn't up to a teacher, that in the end I have to figure this out. So these were big aha moments for me of realizing, yeah, I have to, put on my big girl pants and move forward. But the other thing I will say that is true for all students, I love this other exercise that I would often give people, is to think back to a time when they initiated something. And it doesn't have to be within music. Maybe it was a lemonade stand, maybe there was, some kind of fundraising project that you helped instigate, right? That you were, where did you experience leadership skills? So much good can come to us just from remembering, I know how to do this. I have been in charge before. I didn't question myself, and I can take risks. That piece is also the same piece that can help us get out on stage and bring our best to the moment.
So you just said the word risk, which is a major trigger word for. I don't know if you work with people who aren't musicians. I know that your demographic is probably mostly what we would call classical musicians. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but I've had some fun times, with jazz musicians, jazz composers. I had a DJ client for a while
No, that's fun.
in London. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, go ahead. Tell me about risk.
I thought of it in the lens of classical musicians, because we're always so buttoned up, and we can talk about perfectionism and all that. But
Yeah.
when you talk about risk, the first word that comes to mind is fear. So when you're asking someone to take a chance, to risk and throw their caution to the wind and think about, what is that life that I want it to be? How can I get there? What do I have to do? Fear comes rushing in. And with fear comes the good sidekicks, imposter syndrome and lack mindset, and all those tools that you talk about so beautifully in your book. What are some tools to, first of all, initially quiet the fear, or to put out the fire, so we can actually get back into logic brain and do things that are actually in our best interests?
Okay, well, I can teach you a tool called Cosmic Rage. That might be a good one for us to do. But I also want to say a lot of my work these days around musicians, for musicians, is around mindset. And so much of this has to do with a willingness to investigate these unconscious processes that we have. And part of this is really getting to know your shadow self. But that's a longer term conversation. Cosmic Rage is a little bit more direct, and this is about going up against what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance. Brene Brown calls it your inner gremlins. The tools practitioners, the tools originators, Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels call it part X. So there's lots of names for this, but we're talking about the force that we are all up against. We all have this. We have that self-doubt. It's the source that is trying to keep us playing small in life. And I just want to say what's behind it is fear. And in a kind of warped way, you can think of this as the amygdala, the reptilian part of our brain that is in charge of fight, flight, or freeze. And it is a self protective element, because anything that gets us outside of our comfort zone, anything beyond what we know and what's our regular pattern, is in some way a threat to our equilibrium. So anything that we do can raise this level of anxiety. And so the tool Cosmic Rage, this comes from Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. I love their work. But they teach this tool as a pattern interrupt. So it's a way to shift your emotional state in a moment so that you can then move forward. It's not meant, there's nothing out there that's going to make it go away. Resistance is part of life. It's the thing that's daring us to go past our resistance. So take a moment right now, Chris. Go ahead and close your eyes.
Okay, we're going to do this. I got it. I have plenty of resistance and fear we can work on right now, Angela.
Okay.
So let's do it. Okay.
Okay. So closing your eyes and just go back to a time, or if you're experiencing the resistance now, really allow yourself to feel it. Go into it. Notice what it's doing to your body. You might be having these recurring negative self-talk messages. For me, it's often "you're incompetent." I don't know why my unconscious likes that one, but you probably have your own pet phrases that we are torturing ourselves with. That is what resistance is getting us to do. It's playing up all of our self-doubt, all of our, imposter syndrome. Okay, so if you've got that going, now put that to the side for a moment and allow yourself to get angry at this source. It's not a person, it's not anything other than this resistance, this force. It's not angry at yourself, it's angry at this source that is trying to keep us down. And boil that up inside, really let it percolate. And now silently scream at this. Use your verbs of choice. You can tell it to screw off. You can tell get out of here, F-bomb it, whatever you need to do, as loud and as forcefully in your mind as you can. And see that dark cloud of resistance push back. Your rage is pushing it back towards the horizon. You've just given yourself some space. And that's what we call the I am space. It's this space for you to breathe, for you to be yourself in this space. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
That was very visceral. And I want to say, if anyone listening had done that, or anyone watching live has done that along with us, the things you asked me to conjure came very quickly and very easily. And frankly, the things that I conjured were very old in my experience, like decades old, but they were right there. And when you asked me to conjure the like an angry, because I have a lot of like anger around that issue towards that source. And when you were like, and scream at it, I was already screaming at it before you even finished your sentence. And it did back off. So I did feel like I had a very visual element of cloud, and mine was over a big cornfield, which makes absolutely no sense because I've never even been around a cornfield. But there was space that allowed me to breathe, and I feel like I had some agency over that source, which I guess is kind of the whole point of cosmic rage.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing how people picture this, because everyone digests these tools differently. And they're made to be short like this and to allow your mind's eye to create what it needs in a kind of archetypal sense. But that sense of space is exactly what we need. And that is what I find physically for musicians often gets constricted when we're about to go out on stage, when we're doing anything like we can't get enough breath. We don't feel big when we're in a situation where we need to feel big. So yeah, I love these kinds of exercises.
Can I share what my details were? Because I think what I was feeling is pretty relatable to a lot of people
Yeah.
listening to this podcast. So in my visualization that we did, I had just finished taking audition number 36 and hadn't made it out of the prelims, and I was
Yep.
doing that, having that moment where I was calling my loved ones and saying, I have a one word call by this point in 36. I was just like, hello. I would say nope. And that would be the end of the conversation. I didn't want to talk about it. I would just say the word nope. And I hung up, and the rage was towards you. You're so stupid. You've made so many bad mistakes, and you've wasted
Yep.
so many hours in the practice room. You've made so many decisions, wasted so much money. You're never going to figure this out. You're never going to get a job. You are a total fraud. And I was like, wow.
Wow.
Now, I've been in the LA Phil since 2007. I'm pretty confident in what I'm doing right now, but that moment is so seared into my brain from decades ago, many decades ago now,
Yeah.
that is so crazy that I was able to conjure that up in such a real way so easily.
Well, it's not, it may seem crazy, but it's not. It's very, very normal. We've all been injured, and it's weird to think how much of the injuries are self-inflicted, because that is the story that we've decided is the truth about who we are. So disrupting that story and getting used to telling yourself new stories, that's worth doing, because this relationship that we can have with ourselves can really change. So I can tell you a little. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I have a question. Go ahead. Tell me a little. I have a question, though, the follow up for that in a minute.
Well, this beating ourselves up when we're doing that is one way that we are beating up our shadow. And that's why I spend time with clients working on that, on having a different relationship with our shadow. Because for most of us, we spend many hours in the practice room beating up our shadows instead of finding a way to work with our shadows.
Yeah, I think I can definitely see people at this very moment, probably in their practice rooms, beating themselves up, beating up their shadow. So, just to put a button on this methodology, the cosmic rage
Yep.
exercise, it's easy for me to do that visualization and be cheery about it and laugh it
Yep.
off and say, oh, I have the power to move that cloud. And for me, when we did it, the cloud moved instantly away. It recoiled the moment that I asserted myself.
Yep.
And I imagine you don't have to yell. There's probably different ways you can, whatever style suits you, to press back against that. But because I also have the social proof and validity in my own brain of having been validated by having a nice career, what if you're not able to conjure those images to get the energy to push the cloud back? That, I think that's where a lot of people are going to get stuck in this.
Okay. So I want to say this about the tool and about any of the tools that I've learned and I teach. They are not dependent on people having external validation. This is not dependent on what you have proven to yourself. But I want to say that we have all had the experience of being able to create something and change something, right? Remember that exercise of thinking back, oh yeah, I initiated something in my life. We have all had that. We've all had something that we were able to move forward on. And the truth about the what part X or our resistance is coming at us, you can't can't logically, you can't reason with it. It's not, doesn't work that way. The only way to be able to move something back is to come at it with an equal and opposite force, and that force is rage. It is your rage. It's your total will. We have more fire in us than we realize. And I do want to say this for women and for people from marginalized groups, it can feel scary to access our rage. And this is a tool I had to practice for quite a long time before I could realize, wow, getting angry and accessing rage can actually have a really positive effect, because we're channeling it to prove to ourselves that we can shift our state of mind. A lot of people feel just victimized by their state of mind. And again, it doesn't last long. It's a number of seconds, it's a minute or so, but you have the chance in that minute to move forward positively. That's what we're going for here. In that minute, am I going to dial that phone number that I've been avoiding doing? Am I going to write that email? Am I going to send that grant out? Am I going to practice even when I feel demoralized, right? Like, what am I going to do to affect change? I don't know if that answered the question, Chris.
Totally. Actually, you're making my job so easy today. So, victimization. I think we're going to talk about mindset a lot today, because it seems like everything is tied back to it. Let's talk about victim mindset in terms of, and again, I deal with a lot of people who are starting their own businesses in terms of stepping outside the very narrow window of, I'm a really good flute player in an orchestra, versus I'm a flute player also runs a really robust teaching studio and a yoga practice, and people are getting outside their boundaries. And the ones who are successful have figured out several things. They figured out the mechanics of all this. They figured out the nuts and the bolts. But more importantly, they've come into alignment with a mindset that I can create this. I can make this happen. Anything I want to do, I can figure out how to do it. The ones who are not successful at the entrepreneurship piece or in the performance piece, just getting an orchestra job or teaching job, have fallen prey to a lack mindset, a fixed mindset. And many of them, I would characterize it as victimized. Like, there's too many players and not enough jobs. Academia is too filled with bureaucracy to ever make anything work. Like, I could go on and on about the excuses.
Yeah.
What tools can you offer to flip the script on that? You mentioned the amygdala earlier. The amygdala is going to come out with all the reasons why it's not your fault and how they're trying to get you. How do you flip the script on that afterwards so you can move forward in this alignment and have that power?
Okay, so for most of my clients, when they're coming to me, they're feeling stuck, and it's usually in their career in some way. They don't come to me saying, "Fix my mindset," or "I'm emotionally a wreck." Right? That's but we need to address these things because they are factors in it. And I lost the track of where I was going to come from on this with the answer. Remind me again, Chris.
Well, I love that you just said emotional wreck too, because people aren't usually come and say, "Hi, I'd like some mindset coaching, please." Nobody wants to eat the spinach; they want the smoothie. Like, they want to have the feeling. So, I guess it's just how do you flip the script on the victimization mentality that so many of us find ourselves looking at daily?
Yeah. So thanks. The thing that I wanted to say was, where we start may seem like an unlikely place, but it's often with starting with writing their bios, because either they need it for their website or whatever it is, or they want to get more, they're freelancers and they want to get more bookings, or they're trying to book their ensemble and book a tour or whatever. We have to look at how are they promoting themselves. And this is the place where we see the mindset issue, like as if it's on a billboard. It's like, I don't think so much of myself, right? By the way they've written their description. So we have to get at some uncomfortable questions about why are you making music? What is it you really want out of this? And the reason I find this so helpful is the reason we get into music isn't because we wanted to win a job and have security. I would say that this is still true. Like even people who say, no, that's just what I want. I'm just dead set on getting an orchestral.
People who want job security don't go into orchestral performance. They go into finance and they become
Right,
board members of the orchestras.
maybe. So, but that before you became obsessed, like for me with getting a college teaching job, a tenure track teaching job where I could, play a lot of chamber music. Before that, there was something about music that was speaking to my soul, that was connecting me to some kind of larger experience and a sense of belonging. And I try to help them communicate this in a way so that even on paper with their promotional materials, they're not putting on a show like as fake veneer of, who am I as a professional. No, this is really who I am. This is what I do. And when we can look at it that way, what I love is that often unlocks more opportunities because we end up talking about, well, what else can I do on the road to winning this position that I want? Right? How else can I be of service? How else can I make a contribution and find a way to also bring in the money that I need to sustain this life? And that's where you start seeing people really acknowledge the the gamut of the talents that they have, right? It's not just that they play really well. Just thinking about a former client who was a singer and a body mapping practitioner. And she also did this public speaking because it was kind of leadership skills. And these were all folded into why she loves connecting with people through music. So the redefining of what success is really for you, that can go a long way for people to find their own niche that works for them.
You often talk about in your book helping musicians become the artist they're meant to be. How do you define that for each individual? How do you help them define it for themselves? And I want to also put a little tag question on here. I want to talk about portfolio careers, which you mentioned in your book, because I think it's an important, not a notion, it's an important foundational idea for survival and satisfaction and happiness and all that, that I don't think I didn't talk about that when I was in school. What are your thoughts on that, our identity, finding out who they're supposed to be?
Oh, it just reminds me of this research study that was done in the UK many years ago, where they asked musicians in music school to identify themselves, like what words do they actually use. And they were mostly afraid to call themselves a musician because they didn't think they had earned it yet. And God knows to even call themselves an artist, or to call themselves an oboist or whatever their instrument was. So this thing about identity, who am I, is actually it's a really big question. And that thing about what I say about my work is I help musicians get more of their best work out into the world so they can finally become the artists they are meant to be. And I know that artists they are meant to be is provocative. It's to say, okay, am I really, am I capable? Do I have that? And I want to say that I'm taking the honesty pill here, that the deal is every one of us has much more capability than we realize. And that thing about like tapping into your gifts and finding out what is that version of artistry that is there that we just haven't unlocked, that is the thing that I really am dedicated to. I find that when you help people um, get to know who they really are and find out what it is they really want, that risk factor, it changes it because, okay, I'm not stepping out on stage pretending to be something that I don't feel I really am. I can step out on stage with my shadow, with my unconscious, with all of that, and I can be me. And I can deal with it even when it doesn't go perfectly because I've got a different concept of this larger game that I'm playing. I'm here for a different reason.
I love
Did
that.
that? Okay.
Yeah, I think that that ties into I using auditions as a metaphor. When you step out on stage for an audition, you're not necessarily there to show us your level of creativity to a degree. You're showing us your level of execution and your level of how you handle pressure and
Mm.
also your interpretation of what's being asked of you at that moment. It's not like you're going to start, and I'm talking about the classical or orchestral world, jazz world, totally different situation. You're not going to be improvising on your Strauss excerpts or your Mozart. But what you can show up with is that authenticity and alignment of who you really are. And
Yeah.
that radiates. I mean, that radiates through any job interview. It radiates through any relationship,
Yep.
any teacher mentor student relationship. That alignment radiates, and it feels good when you're around someone who's in alignment. And it also feels really bad or uncomfortable when you're
Yeah.
not around that alignment. And I'm talking about both on the receiving end as a committee member, but
Yeah.
also as a performer. When I have a bad concert, it's probably because I've just kind of got out of whack mentally. It has nothing to do with my trumpet playing for that week. It's like, oh, I'm in a. Okay, here's the case in point. Is it possible that the other 104 musicians on stage at the LA Phil also had a terrible night the night that I did? Or is it that I had a terrible night and I've sort of ruined the alignment of my whole orchestra in my head? I mean, look, well, here's my
Wow.
honesty pill. There are
Yeah.
nights
Yeah.
where the LA Phil, sometimes we're just not on our game. It happens, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
it happens. It's 115 degrees at the bowl. We probably don't sound great.
Yeah.
However, it's usually all about my own alignment, and then I'm creating that reality of whatever, and the audience can feel it. I know they can feel it.
Wow. I just want to. This is what came to mind when I was at Tanglewood a million years ago in the high school program. I was in this Brahms quintet, and it was a dress rehearsal. We ran through the whole damn thing, and after, I mean, the experience that I had during the this run through was like I had left my body. Like it wasn't just my part; it was the whole thing that I was experiencing. And we get done, and we all look at each other, and we go, "Wow, what was that?" Like we couldn't, we didn't know what we'd tapped into. And then the first violinist said, "What?" Like she did not have that experience. And so this question about how much you're picking up is what everyone else, the other 104 players are picking up. That's fascinating. I guess we'd have to wire everybody up for their, beta waves to see what's happening there. But there is this thing about our energy that is around us and the energy that we are communicating with an audience. And there's a kind of loop um, in the best performances where you can feel the wave of what you're sending out and the wave that's coming back. And can you receive this in a positive way? And I think that what we're going for on a good night is to have as much of that happening as possible. And that thing about opening up, like opening up or letting our antennas be picking up what the positive stuff that's around us so that we can ride this wave together. That's the thing. So I'd be curious. Maybe it's something to experiment with on a night where you feel like, oh, it could go either way. Like to what you want to do is get out of your ego and just be in this river of what is happening and be in a way as responsive to it as possible.
just to throw this out there, I don't know if I really want to have a wired up data transfer with the rest of my colleagues. I love you guys a lot, all of you, but I'm going to draw my boundary right there. I'm going to keep my brain in my own head for that. Can we talk a little bit about, in your book, Beyond Talent, you focus a lot on the emotional side of things, like how to deal with uncertainty, fear of failure, which we just talked about. I also would love to get some practical nuts and bolts. And specifically, and this is an area where I geek out all the time. I love going to the Container Store, so that tells you everything you need to know. I like organizational tactics that people can use to prevent burnout. So I just noticed while I was having my sip of my coffee, this mug used to say, wake up, kick ass, repeat. And I've had this mug for like 15 years, and the dishwasher has literally worn off the kick ass side. And now it just says, wake up, repeat. And I'm like, wow, we really lowered the bar. I mean, look, this is a really good plan, by the way. Wake up, repeat. That's what I'm trying to do. But I think that the burnout of time management with all the great stuff that you just said is real.
Yeah.
Is calendar blocking something you recommend? Do you recommend a digital calendar or a paper journal? Like how do we get the tools to survive the nuts and bolts of all that?
Sure. I'm happy to geek out on this stuff too. But I just want to say it reminds me of the only mug that I have with words on it, because I'm not a huge fan of it, was something that a friend gave me years and years ago. And it says on the inner lip, so that it's what you see when you're drinking the coffee or tea. It says, "Good morning, you egg-sucking dog."
Hey.
So that's what I'm doing.
Your day is only going to get better from being called that. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it keeps it real. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say, there's all kinds of marvelous, time management programs out there. But really where I start with clients, and it's not very popular, is I say, you have to not use your phone as your alarm clock. You have to go out and buy an old-fashioned alarm clock and get your gizmos out of the bedroom and far away so that you can't hear them or anything. Because when we pollute our mind first thing in the day with alarming news reports, celebrity gossip, all of our to-do list, if that's what we're berating ourselves right at the beginning of the day, we're just feeding the addiction that continues the whole day long. We're interrupting our chances for being able to synthesize ideas and make these connections that are needed. So that's what I get people to do first thing, so that the first time block in the day, even if they've only got 45 minutes, is for their creative work. Now, for some people, they can't practice first thing in the day, and so it might be, score listening, score reading. It could be reading inspirational literature. It could be writing in your journal with your shadow. It's what's needed to remember that we're human, and to sort of get ourselves to be able to use that post-sleep creative energy towards something positive. And the second thing that I get people to do in terms of mapping out their schedule for the week is to figure out their most important work and then their second most important work. So for my clients, the way I think about this is first it's the creative work, it's the practicing or the composing or whatever it is you need to do. What's the minimum that you absolutely need to get in, and when is that happening? It's ideal if it can be at the same time every day, but to make a real commitment to something, not just when you've got the audition coming up or the concert or whatever, to make that real commitment so that your unconscious gets used to it. This is just what we do. It's 8:00, it's 9:00, boom, that's where we are. And then the second most important time blocking is for the career work that's going to get this stuff moved out into the world. Because I find, so for many people, it's this fight. It's a false dichotomy, but it's this fight between the art that we want to be making and managing that art. So it's art and business. We pretend that these are enemies and that we're always stealing time from the other, and it will never work out. And I just want to say we got to end that that anxiety and that angst, that war that we've created because it's a way we avoid doing the work. And even if you can only afford, like, I've only got 45 minutes, for this, or I can only do this 3 times a week or whatever, when you make that commitment and you follow through, you're proving to yourself that you are trustworthy. And you are proving to yourself, I'm in this for the long haul and I believe in it. And that's when you start to get better results.
I love that. That was fantastic. I can't wait to re-listen to that answer. Something came into my head when you mentioned that doing the work only when the big goal is looming, the audition, the book writing deadline, whatever it is, that puts you in a reactive mindset, and where you're or checking your phone first thing in the morning, you're reacting to everything that's going on around you. And reactivity is unpredictable. It's more susceptible to those I call them squirrels, by the way. The what did you call it? There are some other names. The X factor. What was it? Remind me again.
Paradox and resistance and inner gremlins. Yeah.
So I call them my squirrels. All my Audition Accelerator clients, we talk about how to deal with our squirrels all the time. When you're in a reactive mindset, you're a really weak immune system. You're an easy target for all that. When you're being proactive, even if you're not doing the most optimal or efficient things, you're still taking agency, and you're thinking, here's what I'm doing to make this work. And that makes you feel better just of that alone, I think. I see this all the time with audition people, where they're only practicing their excerpts or only recording themselves or only doing mock auditions the 3 weeks before the audition. Right. That is too late in the game if you're thinking of long-term progress. Same thing with business development. I have clients who have amazing offers out there. They only prospect when they want to do a launch for 3 weeks. It's too late in that. You have to keep that moving all the time. And the good news is, I maybe you'd agree, is you can do this at a much lower intensity level if you're showing up regularly for this stuff. Whereas if you're cramming it, there's a panic mode going on.
Yeah, that consistency is really everything, because again, this goes back to identity. What makes you a musician or what makes you a successful business owner is that you're doing it, right? So proving that to yourself. And then the other thing that I want to say is, I know this is very typical for singers who just dream of doing opera. And so they take all the auditions, and then there's a whole lot of dead time until you get them thinking about what else could they make happen for themselves. And I got a wonderful update from a former client just the other day who I was asking her for a testimonial, but what she gave me was like way better. She said not only what we had done that had made the biggest difference, which was about how she could create opportunities for herself, right? But then she gave me this list of all of these performances that she's booked for this season. And of course there was opera in there, but there was a whole lot more. So yeah, it really is this thing. We are all capable of so much more than we realize, and we don't know how much we are standing in our own way.
All right, I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up, but I have a selfish request.
Okay.
I'm holding in my hand here your book, which is 291 pages, including the index. This is also the 3rd edition. This is also like for real, like actually published. This is like a real thing, you guys. I have been sitting on a project. I have so many projects. I have too many projects, but they're fun. I really feel like I want to put some of the stuff that's in my head into some sort of a book format. I love to talk to the camera, but I think that writing this down would also be helpful. And I'm sort of finding myself hitting some of the same roadblocks in this project as I did when I was starting my orchestral career 40 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. What would you tell somebody? You could talk about me with my book, or you could talk about somebody else who's going to create a huge project. What's like, how do I get started? How do I get past the initial fear or overwhelm of just getting moving?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm working on my book too. This not another edition of Beyond Talent. It's another book, um, and I am towards the end of it, and I'm having that place where like, oh my God, when are you going to really call this damn thing done? So I'm in a different like place with same thing, the resistance and the procrastination, all of that stuff. But what I can tell you about starting with the book was and some people love outlines and some people don't. But if you can get yourself to write every day, that's really the thing. And it's a hell of a lot easier if you decide the night before, what am I going to tackle? Which is what I ask my clients to do. Even like if they've got the time block in their schedule or for, practicing, they've got an hour, they've got an hour and a half, whatever it is, to write down the specific thing that they're really going to focus on. And so you've got a zillion things in your head that you want to get into this book, but my guess is you've got some favorite stories and some like material that absolutely needs to be in there. And if you made a short list of that and you said, okay, what's one piece that I'm going to dare myself to tackle the next day? And you write that shitty first draft of that portion, right?
I have so
That's it.
many of those, so many shitty first
Right.
drafts.
Well, no, no, no. But this is an Anne Lamott thing. If you have a bunch of drafts and you haven't gone back to them to reread them and to just play with them, that's the next piece, right? You go back to yesterday's shitty draft or one you found from 2 months ago that you say, okay, when we reread this, of course we're going to be horrified and we're going to think, oh my God, that's horrendous, right? But on the worst, when I've got the most resistance, I will put a timer on for 20 minutes because 20 minutes I can force myself to do pretty much anything, right? That's like a Pomodoro, time technique. I'll just say 20 minutes. I'm going to work on these two paragraphs and I'm going to play with them really the way you would like with a math problem, or I like to play with blocks in the morning for creativity. It like really helps, like wooden blocks. I'm going to like redesign this thing. I've got these two paragraphs and there's a key idea in here. And if it's easier for you to talk it out than talk into your phone and do dictation or whatever it is and see what you've got. Pretend that you're across the kitchen table from your, ideal reader, which could be a former client, right? It could be someone, and you could just say, how would I say this if I were really saying this, not in my fancy professional voice, but in my real Chris voice, like it, as if this were as conversational as this, right? So I think if you just get yourself to say, I'm going to do that damn thing no matter what. I'm going to do it first thing in the day before I can. That's what I had to do. First, actually, all the editions of the book, get up first thing in the morning before I started worrying about all this other crap. And the first time around, first two editions, I still had a day job. So I was like 5 a.m. I'm a disaster at 5 a.m. I'm not pleasant. You know, I but I could sit there with my beverage of choice and just like zone in on this thing. And what would inevitably happen is after about 5, 10 minutes or so, I just start getting curious. And curiosity is that flip place between judging and whatever else is the possibility. So even if you have to psych yourself out by saying, who the hell wrote this? But I'm curious about it. Like, so there's no there's no pressure about the outcome because we're playing with this and moving it forward.
That idea of curiosity, I love that because curiosity sort of outruns fear. And you can't be curious if you're fearful. I don't think you can have
Yeah.
the same happen at the same time. Neil Gaiman said in an interview that I read that he would go down to his writing space, whatever it was, and he would sit there for, you said 20 minutes, he said like an hour. And he
Hmm.
said, you don't have to write,
Yeah.
but you can't do anything else.
Right,
You
right,
can't
right.
you can't walk around in the garden, you can't exercise, you can't watch TV, you can't read, you can't make a coffee. You just have to sit there, or you can write. And inevitably it would just kickstart his curiosity, and that would, all that crap you mentioned that runs in the morning, eventually that would simmer down, and then he would tap into the curiosity of the moment and get creative. So I'll share with you my working title. Something, something, honesty pill, blah, blah, blah. It's time to face the music, yada, yada, yada. That's what I'm working with so far. So I'll get back to
Okay.
you on that. Um,
But like, wait a minute, I'm just thinking about like key linchpin moments, either in your life or in your experience, working with musicians or other clients. Those key moments, right? That go to those. You've got great material there. And so if the main thing is about worrying about perfect sentences or structure or any of that crap, I would just use the talking it out thing.
so the idea behind the book for me is basically dealing with the same things that many other productivity, self-helpery type books, where it's all the stuff we've been talking about today, but through the lens of an orchestral musician trying to create a career for himself. And I don't think that book's been written yet in terms of that specificity. And I think that the book is more for just anybody rather than people
Yeah.
trying to get an orchestra job. But like one of my favorite books is Bob Rotella, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect, sitting on the shelf right here. And it is about golf, but it's about mental game. It's about all the things that we deal with all the topics that we covered today. And I think
Mhm.
that is a really good read for most people in terms of just the toolbox to be happy and be in alignment and be one of those people that radiates that when you're around them. I like to be around those people. I want to be one of those people. So that's what the book is for. So I will, you know what I'll do? Here we go. It's September 19th at 11:01 a.m. Pacific time. I am making my
Yay!
proclamation with you, Angela, right here that, okay, 1 year from today, there's going to be something for you to check out. All right. I wrote it.
Ah,
There it is. And if you guys listening to this replay, have some thoughts, want to send me some questions, Chris@honestypill.com. You can tell me what you want in the book. I'll make sure I answer that. Okay.
wow.
Couple
Great.
rapid. Yeah. Hey, there we go. I didn't know that was going to happen today. Whoa, God. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to musicians today that you wish you had received earlier in your career?
Oh, I remember this grad student we'd had working in the office at New England Conservatory. So she was one of our assistants, and she told me after she graduated, it was several years later, she just said, while I was in school, I just wished that someone had told me it's all going to work out. And that's the thing. She didn't need to know that it's going to work out the way she imagined it would, just that it would work out. And and I think that's the thing that I want to say to people is you're going to figure out a way to live, a way to be in the world. You have all that you need to find that alignment, and it's going to take going through some crap to get there, but it's totally worth it. I just love that, like, to lean into this trust that the universe in some wild way has our back. And so just to keep going forward and being more of, yeah, of the version of yourself you dream. There's a way to find yourself.
That was beautiful. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Before we go, can you just talk quickly about the Musician's Pathfinder Guide and
Oh
other
yeah.
ways that our lovely audience can find you other than angelabeeching.com?
Yep, yep, yep. Well, actually, if you go to angelabeeching.com, and Beeching has two E's, angelabeeching.com, there is a place right there on that front thing where you can sign up for this thing I call the Pathfinder Guide. And you could say, what is she selling? What is this all about? But what the reason I made this Pathfinder Guide is that I found that there are kinds of questions that musicians aren't asking themselves when you're feeling stuck, or when you're not sure about the next action to take, or you're just feeling discouraged. So I put together my 6 favorite questions to ask yourself, to help with that jump starting. And with that, you can be on my newsletter list. I send out once a week some career tips and inspiration, and we meet once a month online for a clinic. You can ask me anything you want. So yeah, I love connecting with musicians, and I hope they check it out.
I think it's important to surround yourself with reminders of the vibe you're trying to create, and getting on a newsletter mailing list like Angela's is a really, really great idea. Angela Beeching, thank you so much for reaching out and connecting with me after all these years. And I hope I'm going to be in Boston again soon, and we'll definitely have to connect and hang out a bit. And thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. And I can't wait to read the book. So I'm thrilled.
All right, now I'm here comes my squirrels. Tell me up. We'll make it happen. All right, everybody, go time block that calendar. Put your phone in the other room, and even embrace your cosmic rage if that helps you push that cloud away. Thank you so much for your time today. That's it for me. I'm out of here. I'll see you next time, and happy practicing.